At 75, Joyce DeWitt finally reveals the ugly truth about Three's Company. A show about three roommates that made America laugh was actually a nightmare behind the scenes. The male star got paid 5 times more than the women. When one blonde actress asked to be paid fairly, TV bosses destroyed her on purpose. They made her film alone. They turned friends against each other. They even blacklisted her from Hollywood. Now the truth comes out about the show that fell apart because of greed, lies, and broken trust. In early 1976, Fred Silverman had just become the head of programming at ABC, and he was looking for something bold to shake things up. Then he came across a British sitcom called Man About the House. The idea was simple, but shocking for American TV at the time. 2 single women sharing an apartment with a single man. All 3 major networks had already turned it down, saying it was too risky. But Silverman couldn't stop thinking about it. He had liked the idea when he was still at CBS, and now he was in a position to do something about it. So he called up producers Don Taffner and Ted Bergman and asked them to turn the British show into something that could work in the US. He wanted something fresh, something that would push boundaries the same way All in the Family had done with race and politics. Against all odds, the project got the green light. At first, the show almost went in a completely different direction. The first person hired to adapt it was Peter Stone, a respected Broadway writer. He set the story in New York and made the main character a chef at a fancy French restaurant. His roommates, one was a secretary and the other a high-end fashion model. It all sounded too polished, too glamorous. When Silverman read the script, he knew it wouldn't work. It didn't feel like something most Americans could connect with. Stone's version was dropped before it even made it to production. That early failure showed just how tricky it would be to take a British idea and make it feel right for American viewers. They needed something more down-to-earth, something that felt like it could really happen in a place like Santa Monica. That's when Larry Gelbart, the creator of MASH, stepped in, though not very willingly. He thought the concept was too light, too silly, but as a favor to Silverman, he agreed to take a shot at it. Working with his son-in-law, Gary Markowitz, Gelbart came up with a new version. Markowitz was the one who came up with the title Three's Company. In this version, the guy was named David Bell, a wannabe filmmaker who could cook. He lived with Jenny, a DMV employee, and Samantha, an actress trying to catch a break. They all shared a place in a building called the Hacienda Palms in North Hollywood. Gelbart didn't stay with the show for long, but his version helped shape the tone. It brought the idea closer to something that felt familiar, but still a little daring. The day before filming was set to begin on Three's Company, ABC had a problem. They had tried 3 different pilots, but no one had nailed the role of Chrissy Snow. Time was running out. ABC's entertainment president, Fred Silverman, was desperate. So he sat down with a stack of audition tapes and began fast-forwarding through them. He wasn't expecting much. Then something caught his eye. It was Suzanne Summers. He had seen her once on The Tonight Show. He stopped the tape, rewound it, and watched closely. He couldn't believe she hadn't been picked. When he asked why she was rejected, no one could give him a real answer. Without wasting a second, Silverman had her called in. The next day, she was on set. Just like that, Chrissy Snow had come to life. And Suzanne Summers would go on to become one of the most recognizable faces on TV, helping the show run for 8 seasons and over 170 episodes. If Silverman hadn't stayed late that night, things could have turned out very differently. But Suzanne's casting wasn't the only thing that nearly changed. Just before filming started, producers began second-guessing John Ritter. They worried that his goofy, physical comedy might send the wrong message. Jack Tripper was supposed to pretend he was gay so he could live with 2 women, but the producers were afraid Ritter looked too convincing. Some of them thought the audience might believe Jack really was gay, which they felt would ruin the plot. The doubts got so serious that Silverman had to step in again. He said Ritter stays, and thank God he did. The very thing they were worried about, his physical, over-the-top comedy, became the heartbeat of the show. Ritter's pratfalls and funny faces made him a star. He later won both an Emmy and a Golden Globe. What they once saw as a weakness became his greatest strength. Even before Ritter was cast, the role of Jack Tripper was wide open. Barry Van Dyke, the son of Dick Van Dyke, was a strong contender. So was Michael Lembeck, who would later direct episodes of Friends. And then there was Billy Crystal. He didn't get the part, but it didn't slow him down. That same year, he landed a breakthrough role on the show Soap. Still, it's hard to imagine anyone else but Ritter as Jack. His charm, timing, and physical humor made the character unforgettable. And the cast wasn't just lucky, it was brave. Just 6 episodes in, Joyce DeWitt, who played Janet, stood her ground. She was given a line that insulted a prostitute character, but it didn't feel right to her. Janet, as she saw her, wasn't someone who judged others like that. When the producer pressured her to say the line, she refused. John Ritter even offered to take it for her, but DeWitt wouldn't budge. "Bring a gun," she said. "I still won't say it." Later, when ABC tried to go back on a promised raise, she skipped work and went straight to the top, telling the network head it wasn't about money, it was about integrity. She got her raise. And she earned a reputation as someone who didn't back down when it mattered. The network showed that kind of commitment too. When they wanted Audra Lindley to play Mrs. Roper, they found out she was booked for a stage play in Los Angeles. Most would have moved on. ABC didn't. Instead, they paid $8,000 to buy out the entire theater for the night, just so she could tape the pilot. It was a bold move, but it paid off. Lindley's chemistry with Norman Fell was so good, the pair got their own spin-off, The Ropers, 2 years later. When Three's Company premiered on March 15th, 1977, no one expected it to last. It was only supposed to run for 6 episodes as a spring tryout. Network executives were skeptical. Viewers, however, had other plans. The quirky setup, a man pretending to be gay so he could live with 2 women, caught people's attention. The cast had instant chemistry, and the laughs landed right away. That very first episode, called A Man About the House, surprised everyone by ranking number 28 for the week. That was just the beginning. As each episode aired, more and more people tuned in. By the time the 6th one hit the screen on April 21st, it had become a full-blown hit. The ratings skyrocketed to an average of 23.1, which placed the show at number 11 for the entire 1976 to 77 season. That kind of success, especially for a mid-season replacement, was unheard of. ABC didn't hesitate. They renewed the show right away, knowing they had something big on their hands. When the show returned in the fall, ABC gave it a prime spot on Tuesday nights, right after Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. It was a smart move. Audiences kept coming back, and the ratings soared even higher. For the 1977 to 78 season, it climbed to number 3 in the country. Nearly a third of all TV households were watching Three's Company. And it didn't stop there. The very next year, it hit number 2 with a staggering 30.3 rating. That momentum carried into the following season too, keeping it firmly in the top tier. For a show that started as a long shot, it had become a cultural giant. But not everyone was laughing. The show's suggestive humor didn't sit well with some conservative groups. The PTA gave it poor ratings, and the National Federation for Decency went even further. They started a campaign to pressure companies into pulling their ads from the show. Some sponsors actually did, but ABC stuck by the show, and the controversy only made more people curious. It's often the case that when something stirs up debate, it draws a bigger crowd. That's exactly what happened here. Beyond the laughs and the headlines, Three's Company also did something quietly revolutionary. It showed that family didn't have to mean parents and kids. Jack, Janet, and Chrissy, and later Cindy and Terry, created their own kind of family, one built on friendship, trust, and shared chaos. Their apartment in Santa Monica felt like a warm, wild little world of its own, where friends supported each other like siblings. That idea of friends becoming family paved the way for shows like Friends and Will and Grace. It changed the way sitcoms looked at relationships and home life. But even with all the fun, Klein sometimes clashed with the producers. Once, he tried to talk seriously about his character during a run-through. The moment he said, "I'd like to discuss my character," they cut him out of the show for 4 weeks. That's how tight the control was behind the laughter. In 1978, the whole cast ended up on the cover of Newsweek for a story about sex and TV. But what should have been a big moment turned sour. The magazine featured them in a provocative pose, and the cast had no idea it would be marketed that way. John Ritter and Joyce DeWitt were shocked. They thought it was going to be about comedy, not sex appeal. Ritter later said it gave the whole set a creepy feeling, and DeWitt was clearly upset. Even Suzanne Summers claimed she didn't know the shoot would be that suggestive. The photo stirred tension, not just among the cast, but in how the show was being viewed. Suddenly, the focus shifted. What the actors saw as fun and slapstick comedy was now being sold to the public as sexy and scandalous. The show's theme song almost took a strange turn, too. At first, the producers wanted the three stars to sing it themselves. That didn't go well. Composer Joe Raposo, who wrote "Come and Knock on Our Door," said the actors gave it a shot but just couldn't sing. They brought in Ray Charles, no, not the famous one, but another Ray Charles who worked in TV, to coach them. After an hour, the producers asked what he thought. He didn't want to be rude, so he said, "I'm not sure." The producers just laughed and told him, "Well, we are. We like the way you sing it." That's how Ray Charles and Julia Rinker Miller ended up recording the theme instead. Behind them were some of the best session musicians around. Hal Blaine played drums, Tommy Tedesco was on guitar, and Raposo even played sax. They turned it into one of the most unforgettable opening songs on television. Suzanne Summers, meanwhile, was making moves most people didn't see. During the first season, she gave up her entire salary from the first 6 episodes. She handed it over to a manager named Jay Bernstein. Her deal was simple: make me famous, or it's all for nothing. At the time, Three's Company was just a mid-season replacement, and no one knew if it would last. But Summers was thinking long-term. Bernstein was the guy who'd turned Farrah Fawcett into a star, and Summers wanted the same. Within a year, she landed on 55 magazine covers. Her face was everywhere. Bernstein later admitted he didn't think she was all that good-looking or even talented, but he saw fire in her. He said, "I hadn't seen that kind of passion since Sammy Davis Jr." Summers bet on herself, and it worked. She went from sitcom newcomer to one of the most recognizable names on TV. In the late 1970s, Three's Company was one of the biggest shows on TV. Everyone was watching it. But while the audience laughed at the goofy antics on screen, something unfair was happening behind the scenes. John Ritter, the show's lead, was making $150,000 an episode. Suzanne Summers, who played the bubbly and beloved Chrissy Snow, was only getting $30,000. Joyce DeWitt, the other female lead, was paid the same. Suzanne was a huge reason people tuned in. She had one of the best ratings with women aged 18 to 49, exactly the group advertisers wanted. But even as the show became a hit, she was making a fifth of what Ritter earned. When she started, Suzanne had been thrilled just to be there. She was a struggling single mom and grateful for the paycheck. At $3,500 a week, it felt like a dream. As the show took off, her salary rose to $30,000 per episode. But she couldn't help noticing that other male stars, like Alan Alda from MASH and Carol O'Connor from All in the Family, were making 6 figures every week. The gap wasn't just unfair, it was massive. By 1980, Three's Company was heading into its 5th season. That's when Suzanne decided to speak up. She wanted equal pay. She wasn't asking for more than Ritter, just the same, $150,000 per episode, plus 10% of the profits. Before going into negotiations, she told her co-stars about her plan. She said, "If you back me up, we'll all get it. I'll be the one to take the heat." Her husband, Alan Hamill, who used to work as a TV producer, went in to negotiate for her. He warned her it might not go well, but Suzanne didn't think they'd dare get rid of Chrissy. She was wrong. ABC didn't just reject her request, they were cold about it. "Who do you think you are?" they asked. "John Ritter is the star." Instead of negotiating, they offered her a tiny raise, just $5,000 more per episode. She refused, and that's when things really fell apart. What Suzanne didn't know was that the timing couldn't have been worse. Not long before, the stars of Laverne and Shirley, Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams, had gotten a huge raise from ABC after fighting for it. That deal had left the network bitter. They didn't want any more actresses asking for what the men were getting. According to her husband, the network decided they needed to make an example out of someone. Suzanne was perfect for that. She wasn't the title character, and they thought they could replace her without hurting the show. Unlike Laverne and Shirley, you could fire Chrissy Snow, and they did. But they didn't just fire her, they humiliated her. Even though she still had time left on her contract, they cut her part down to just 60 seconds per episode. They filmed her alone on a separate set, pretending to talk on the phone with the other characters. She wasn't allowed to see her castmates. A security guard walked her to and from the set like she was a criminal. The people she had worked with every day now somehow ignored her. The producers told the rest of the cast she was greedy, that she was trying to ruin the show, and most of them believed it. She was left completely alone. The damage was deep, the friendships were over, and her career, it was suddenly frozen. No one wanted to hire her. "I was fired from the #1 show at the height of my success," she said, "and I couldn't even get an interview." For years, she was blacklisted from television, all because she dared to ask to be paid the same as a man. After Suzanne Summers suddenly left Three's Company in 1981, everything changed. The producers were caught off guard and rushed to replace her. They brought in Jenna Lee Harrison as Cindy Snow, Chrissy's clumsy cousin. But the switch was too quick and too jarring. Viewers didn't connect with Cindy. She tried to act silly like Chrissy, but it didn't feel the same. The charm was missing, and the chemistry just wasn't there. Ratings took a nosedive. A show that used to be in the top 10 sank to 20th place. The writers didn't know what to do with Cindy either. She barely had storylines and often faded into the background. Within a few months, the producers realized they needed someone else. That led to a round of auditions, and one of the people who showed up was a young Heather Locklear. She was nervous. It was February 14th, 1982, and she didn't want to sweat through her outfit. So she stuffed tissues under her arms before the audition. But while she was reading her lines, one of the tissues slipped out and fell onto the floor. Everyone in the room laughed. Locklear was embarrassed, but kept going. On her way out, she heard someone whisper about the tissue mishap. That moment stuck with her for years, and she even joked about it in interviews later. She didn't get the role, but her career was just beginning. Soon, she'd make it big on shows like Dynasty and Melrose Place. Eventually, the producers chose Priscilla Barnes to play Terry Alden, a nurse who was smart and polished. But from her first day, things were tense. The producers wanted control over everything. They told her to change her hair color because it was too blonde. They made her weigh in weekly to make sure she stayed a certain size. They even dictated what she wore, often pushing for outfits she didn't feel comfortable in. Barnes didn't hide how unhappy she was. Years later, she said those 3 years on the show felt like pure misery. Still, she stayed until the very end in 1984. Meanwhile, the writers were scrambling to fix the comedy. Chrissy had been the heart of the show's humor with her goofy lines and silly moments. After she left, they tried to give more of that to Jack Tripper, played by John Ritter. He was great, but he couldn't carry it all alone. So, the writers began leaning more on Don Knotts, who played Mr. Furley. His over-the-top reactions and clueless misunderstandings became a big part of the show. Episodes started centering around him more, especially ones like Furley versus Furley. While Knotts did help keep the laughs coming, the show's tone had definitely changed. The creative spark was fading. Joyce DeWitt, who played Janet, felt it too. She had ideas for her character to grow, maybe open a flower shop or chase career dreams, but the producers didn't want to take chances. They stuck to safe, familiar plots. By the time the series ended, Janet was married off in the finale, a move DeWitt thought didn't fit the strong, independent woman she had been playing. Viewership kept dropping. Compared to its peak, the final season lost over a fifth of its audience. Critics noticed the slump. ABC came close to pulling the plug early, but they let the show run a short final season just to hit the mark for syndication. Norman Fell never wanted to leave Three's Company. The show was a hit, and he was happy playing the nosy landlord, Mr. Roper. But in 1979, the producers asked him to star in a spin-off called The Ropers. He said no at first. He was worried. What if the new show failed? So the producers made a promise. If The Ropers got canceled after one season, he and Audra Lindley, who played Mrs. Roper, could come back to Three's Company. They even put it in writing. With that safety net, Norman finally agreed. When The Ropers premiered, it looked like he made the right call. The ratings were strong. The show even ended the season as one of the top 10 most watched. But then, everything changed. ABC made a strange move. For the second season, they shifted The Ropers to Saturday night. That time slot was a problem. It had a much smaller audience. Ratings dropped fast. Norman begged the network to change it back, but they refused. Then, in May 1980, ABC canceled the show. The timing raised eyebrows. It came just 1 month after the promise to let Norman return had expired. Norman believed the decision to cancel had been made earlier, but ABC had waited on purpose. They didn't want to bring the Ropers back, especially now that Don Knotts had taken over as the building's landlord, Mr. Furley. It was cheaper to have just one landlord on the show. Norman went back to the producers, asking to return. They said no. In March 1981, he and Audra made one last guest appearance, and then the Ropers were gone for good. As that drama faded, a new one began behind the scenes. During the last season of Three's Company, Joyce DeWitt walked into a room by accident and found out something big. The producers were holding secret auditions for a new spin-off called Three's a Crowd. They were looking for someone to play Jack Tripper's new girlfriend. What shocked Joyce the most was that John Ritter already knew about it. He hadn't told her or anyone else in the cast. When she shared what she'd seen, the mood on set changed. The cast felt betrayed. It was especially painful coming from John, who had always seemed like their friend. The final season was tense, and it showed. A show that once felt like a family was now full of silence and hurt. Not long after, another surprise happened. Suzanne Summers, who had been fired from Three's Company years earlier after fighting for equal pay, tried to come back. Her husband, Alan Hamill, made the pitch. He wanted Suzanne to play Jack's wife in Three's a Crowd. It was a bold move. ABC had threatened to sue her before, and she'd already lost other opportunities because of the fallout. But now, they were offering a kind of peace offering. The producers weren't interested. They had already cast someone else, Mary Carteret, as Jack's girlfriend. For Suzanne, that door closed for good. Even though both spin-offs followed the same formula that worked for the original show, neither one captured the same magic. The Ropers didn't work because the couple had moved to a fancy neighborhood, which took away the tension that made their characters funny. Moving it to Saturday nights made it worse. Three's a Crowd had bigger problems. The writers didn't know how much Jack should change now that he was in a serious relationship. The tone felt off. It also had to compete with the A-Team, which was a huge hit. But more than anything, the show just didn't feel the same without the original group. The energy, the comedy, the rhythm, it was gone. Even though ABC wanted to keep it going with another short season, John Ritter turned it down. He wanted a full commitment or nothing. They chose nothing. Years later, Joyce DeWitt looked back on it all. She didn't focus on the fights or the business deals. What stayed with her were the fans. People often told her how much the show had meant to them. Some said it helped them through tough teenage years. Some said it felt like their only safe place. Joyce realized Three's Company wasn't just about laughs or misunderstandings. It was about love, trust, and friendship. It gave people comfort, even if the people making it were struggling behind the scenes. She called that a blessing she never could have imagined. Then came a final twist. In 2003, 1 month before John Ritter died, he made a phone call. Out of nowhere, he rang up Suzanne Summers. They hadn't spoken in over 20 years. He greeted her with, "Hey, babe," then said, "I forgive you." Suzanne was stunned. She wanted to say, "You forgive me?" but held it back. During that call, he invited her to appear on his new show, 8 Simple Rules, in a dream sequence with Joyce. She turned it down, suggesting they do something else together instead. They agreed to find a better project, but they never got the chance. John died suddenly of a heart problem at just 54. It was heartbreaking, but at least before the end, they had made peace. Suzanne later said she was grateful for that moment, even though it came so late.